Welcome back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here, in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Jake Friedman.
And I'm Brendan Hansen.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
This week is a two-part episode that I'm very excited about. Jake and I are going to talk about games as gifts, and we also did a draft where we built collections for $100 or less. So we're going to split this episode into two parts. We're going to talk about games as gifts, everything you might need to consider while thinking about giving games as gifts to people. It's sort of that time of the year. And then on the back end of the show, we're going to talk through this exercise of building a collection for under $100, which is sort of loosely related to the previous idea, maybe. We didn't want to recommend specific games as gifts, and we thought this would be a fun way to kind of tie it into the feel of the show. And then we also get to do a cool exercise and talk about it with all of you.
One thing we're intentional about on our show is to not be super forward about selling games to our audience. We try and just give our opinions, talk about games, and let those chips fall where they may. That's why you don't really hear us talking much about this is the price of the game, things like that are more directly related to that question of should I buy it or should I not. So in some ways, I think this exercise of picking our collection with a budget of $100 is the first time we're sort of like dipping our toes into that. Again, not explicitly telling people to go out and buy things, but I think for the first time, we're sort of saying like, these are games that have a great value.
Yeah. And Jake, boy, did we find some games with good value. I'm so excited to talk about the collections we drafted. We both sort of went in different directions, and I'm going to be really curious to hear what the response is from the audience on like which collection they would pick maybe.
And most importantly, what $100 game collection they would build if given those same criteria. So surely there'll be tons of fun discussion following this in our Discord. If you want to join these great conversations that happen after every episode, we have a link in the description of this podcast down in the show notes. And we would love to have you join us there. And an exciting announcement, one thing that we have going on in the Discord right now, as you're listening to this episode, is our poll. What do we call this? A ranking poll up. So one thing we did last year, and it's going to be a trend that we are going to continue this year. Or no, a tradition. It's a tradition, a decision-based tradition, is we will once again be ranking every game that we've covered on the show this year in a final sort of holiday blowout end-of-year episode. And we have the ability for you, the listener, to go into our Discord and vote in that poll yourself so that we will, at the end of the episode, be able to compare Brendan and I's list of our top games of the year to what our audience thought the top games of the year are among those that we've covered. And we'd love to have you participate in that. You can also, if you want to just forego the Discord entirely, that's fine. You can also vote in our poll at decisionspacepodcast.com/ranking.
And I will also chip in and say that you don't have to have played every single game that Jake and I covered on the show this year to participate. You can potentially just rank the games that you have played, or you can rank them in order of interest. Sort of number one is the game I most want to play, or maybe number one is the game I have played and enjoyed most, and then go down the list. But We'd love for you to participate either Decision Space podcast.com/rankings, like Jake said, or in the appropriate channel in our Discord.
All right. And one other announcement before we get into giving games as gifts discussion topic is to let our pre-planners know that at long last, kind of fitting, as this will be maybe the final game covered before we hit episode 100. If not the final game, the second to last game covered before we hit episode 100. We'll be covering one of the games we talked about covering on this show from the very beginning. Honestly, one of the sort of impetuses for thinking about decision space in games for me and how it's interesting, how it fits in with these sports analogies that we were really into at the beginning of the show and have fallen off of lately. We will be covering BattleCON.
Jake, I'm so excited for this game. I'm going to save it and I'm not going to go into it because I know when we cover it in our episode next week, it's going to be a phenomenal episode about a game that sort of defies a lot of trends in the board game industry and manages to do something unique sort of its own, but really emulating something else. I'm not going to go into it more, but I will say if you want to check out BattleCon alongside of us, you won't have time to source a physical copy, though you could print and play one. I think there are options to do that. But there's also a free online version of the game on Steam. So if you just search BattleCON on Steam, you could find it. It's not the most active, but it's a great way to learn the game and mess around with the systems. So if you want to pre-plan along, maybe that's a fun little way you could get your head into the game before we jump into it next week. And it's going to be a good one. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it should be great. But without further ado, things to consider while giving games as gifts. Brendan, let's just jump right into this topic and think first about if we're going to give a game as a gift to somebody, the first thing that comes to mind is the audience, who that person
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and I think why even cover this in the first place too? And I feel part of that is giving games as gifts can be precarious, right? There's so much potential for it to go so right, but there's also so much potential for it to go so wrong. I know the games I was given as gifts that were total flops, where I was given this game and I sort of said, "Oh, thank you so much for getting me a game," and then I never touched it. And that's okay. Not all games can hit as gifts. But I think that if you are intentional with the way you give a game as a gift, it can go a long way. And like you were saying, Jake, audience really matters. So you have to consider like, who am I giving this game to and what is their experience with games? Are they a gamer? Do they play board games regularly? Are they a video gamer, but they've never played a board game? Will this person have an interest in owning and playing a game? Are they a non gamer? If so, why are you buying this person a game as a gift? And that doesn't mean you shouldn't, but you got to take some things into consideration there, right?
Yeah,
I guess also, how often do you give games as gifts, Jay?
fairly often. I think I give games and gifts in two situations primarily. One is just offloading games that I am moving out of my collection to friends who I know are gamers and I think might enjoy them or maybe even
Nice.
actively request them. And that's something I love to do. And the other is, birthday, holidays. And I think I've just started thinking about Christmas shopping a little bit this year, and I think I'll be giving one game this year as a gift to my mom, and I can
Oh,
talk a little bit more about that later on if we want, but not very many for just sort of like the general like I have to think of a gift, and buying somebody a board game. I think it's more fraught than it isn't. So my blanket advice at the top would be probably don't.
yeah. Yeah. Why?
Kind of comes down to a couple of factors. One is that unless you know that the person is a gamer. So let's start with if you know the person is a board gamer, a board game enthusiast, one of us or somebody who's interested in entering this hobby, then I think what you should do is ask them what games they're interested in. You
Yeah.
know, if it's somebody who is on Board Game Geek, maybe they can just give you a screenshot of their collection, right? I think that's something that a lot of I noticed the Board Game Barrage Secret Santa, they call it Ghost Turkey, excuse me, where it's like a community wide gift exchange to where everybody's assigned somebody to give to. They require that everybody has an updated Board Game Geek collection page so that it can be shared with the person so that you know that you won't be doubling up on a game they already have. So I think that's important, right? It stinks to get like a double copy of a game that you already have. That's happened to me before. I think my father-in-law gave me a game that I really appreciated, super thoughtful, time stories, but I already owned it. So,
Yeah.
I was able to return it and exchange it. No big deal. But, kind of like that moment of like unwrapping the present and you're like, great, a game, but I have it already. It's kind of awkward. And I think the other thing to think about with gamers is that our tastes are so specific unto ourselves. And this is something that really came to the fore for me anytime I'm with my wife and we dip into a game store. It's something we like to do on vacation, see a new one, or even if we're just in the miniature market retail store here, looking through the shelves, like so often there's just so many games that I don't really have any interest in playing.
Hmm.
Just shelves and shelves of games, and it's really exciting to be in there and look at them. But 9 times out of 10, if Bridget just pulls a game off the shelf because it's a theme that appeals to her, or some other reason, it's either a game like I know I don't like, or it's a game that I've never heard of, and I Google it on Board Game Geek, and it's like has like a rating of like 6.2.
Yeah, I feel like you're summarizing some really good key points here, which is that with gifts, you always want it to be exciting and special. And when with hobby gifts, it's even harder, right? Because you're either in your experience, you're getting games from people who are outside the board gaming hobby, and at least in the same way you are. So they don't have the insider knowledge to know exactly what you would want without asking. And if you give a game to someone who doesn't play games, you have to really take into account that you're like almost offering a hobby experience, which can be dicey because you never want to give a gift that becomes a problem for someone, right? Like it sucks to be given a gift where it's like, oh, now I have this thing that exists in my life that I don't want to use. And now as an object taking up vital, like precious space in my home and footprint of my brain. Gee, thanks. Like that's no fun. So in my mind, either it's like if I'm giving someone who's a gamer, like you said, Jake, just ask. Or there might be a really special circumstance where if I was buying Jake a gift, I would buy him Bruges. That'd be the only game I'd consider buying for Jake. An out of print game that I know he loves, but I wouldn't dare give it to him without the expansion, the river expansion, that I know is the thing that he actually wants to help get that game to the table. So if you have something that could be a really special surprise that you know is a slam dunk, go for it. But otherwise, I feel like treading lightly is the way. And then if you're giving a gift to a gamer, I don't think you have to take into account things like the rules, how hard are the rules to teach, or are they going to get this played? That's something that they're used to doing themselves, and it's a core part of their experience with something, right? But if I'm giving a game to someone who doesn't play games, the number one thing that comes to mind is how can can I play this with them? So I'm giving them a game, yes, but I'm also just giving them an experience, right? I'm trying to give them a memorable experience that we can have together. I'm going to buy my aunt Blue Lagoon. I'm going to teach her the rules and we're going to play it together. And here's how that I think that might happen. And I know that she's open to that. That could be a much better experience than here's this game. I think you'll like it. Bye.
I think your analogy about giving somebody a hobby experience is so apt because if you just transfer it, what's this like transpose? What's the
Yeah,
word?
sure.
Like,
Sure. Transpose.
so
Yeah.
you want to transpose that with like a different hobby experience of somebody
Knitting.
giving to you? Exactly. Like so your wife really loves knitting, for example, or your partner really loves knitting, and they love it so much that they want you to love it too and share that experience with you. So you open your Christmas or Hanukkah or birthday gift, and inside you have a starter knitting set, or I can now, how to crochet a hat book with like the necessary ingredients. That might be great. Maybe you're someone who would really appreciate that. But I think as for like a blanket, everyone who has never, experienced that hobby before in any way, receiving that gift is probably something that's just going to sit there. And even if they're willing to, oh, and don't worry, I'm happy to like teach you how to do it. Your first, crocheting lesson is on me. Well, that's like really assuming a lot of somebody's time,
Yeah.
And I think board games are exactly comparable with that. It's like, here's your fishing rod. Don't worry, I'll take you out fishing. We'll drive 45 minutes out to somebody's lake and spend the day doing that. It's like, well, that is great for somebody, but it's certainly not going to be, the gift or experience that everybody wants to be occupying their time. So now not only have you like given somebody like a burden of like just a physical object that they don't have any sort of interest in, but now you're also expecting, sort of in return some of their
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So it's just very, very, very fraught. Unless you know something about the person. So clearly, you know something about your aunt that she would be open to this, that perhaps she's enjoyed similar games or even this game with you in the past and, enjoys the time to play games. Because
Yep.
certainly that's not true of everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, no matter how much you love games, you should not give a game as a gift to someone who you, one, don't know if they like games or not, or two, definitely don't if you think they don't like games. That would
Yeah.
just be an awful gift. And I think it should go beyond like you think if you kind of think they might like playing games, that's probably not good enough. It
No.
probably has to be like,
Because
they
we
like
love
games.
games. So
Yes.
we think that everyone, just as like a bias or like, I think board games have something to offer for everybody. That's what
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that other people share that same belief or
Yeah.
that it's my responsibility or duty to like evangelize them into the board gaming hobby
Yeah.
with their Christmas gift.
Exactly. So if you do though, if you know they like games, it can be a good gift. Games as gifts can work great. but you just have to think about how the experience of the gift will be received too.
Yeah.
So
I think
maybe,
one more thing, just as like a general note on this, is to be
yeah,
really careful too that this gift isn't covertly a gift to you.
to you. Oh, yeah. So important, Jake.
Like
Yes. Don't
I
do it.
a couple of examples would be when I was a kid and I would be at Target with my mom, you know, what, and she's like, what does your sister want for Christmas? Like, I think she might really want Luigi's Mansion for the Nintendo GameCube. It's like, I don't like that's just like a crappy little kid move, because it's like, you know what, maybe she'll like it, or maybe if she won't, doesn't matter, I'll get to play Luigi's Mansion on the Nintendo GameCube. And I think, it's easy to sort of fall into that like shitty little kid mentality, even as an adult, to where it's like, I've asked things like my wife, like, what game would you be interested in? And that's great. If I get her at the game store and seeing like what appeals to her, trying something that might be outside of what I would pick for myself. But if I buy that game, I have to accept that that is not a gift for Bridget. That's a gift for myself.
Yeah,
To get a game that Bridget might want to play with me and we could enjoy together. But I can't like
totally.
put that on like the like Bridget Christmas gift list. No
This would
way.
be like if I bought Maya running shoes because I want as a Christmas gift or as a Hanukkah gift because I wanted her to come running with Miller and I, but like she has no interest in running. Like that's not a gift. That's
Right.
what are you doing? Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
right.
Yeah, you can't buy gifts for yourself for someone else because everyone knows exactly what you're doing and it
Yeah.
defeats the purpose of gift giving at all.
Right.
Maybe really quickly, Jake, we can talk about now that we've done all the disclaimers.
That's the
So
most important part of the
that's the
episode.
most important part of the episode. But
But I
so
return to my first point. Probably don't. That is my it still remains my advice.
But so you found your sweet spot. You found a situation where you are going to give as a game as a gift. I think we should talk through things you should consider just in case, right?
Mm,
Jake's like,
okay.
no, just don't, just
Let's do
don't.
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
the number one thing is I feel like I'm just going to list them and then we can talk about what's most important: size, complexity, theme, and overall excitement. I feel like when you're giving something as a gift, airing lighter feels better to me than airing too heavy
Absolutely. Yeah.
because it's going to hit the table easier, which means there's more of a chance for them to actually experience your gift
We've already established it has to hit the table like probably that
within a
day.
week. That
Within a
day,
week. If it doesn't hit the table within a week, it's never hitting the table. That's just
yeah,
the decision space gift giving board game principle number one. If it
yes,
doesn't hit the table in the first week and you aren't there to physically see it happen, it didn't happen and it won't happen.
yeah, totally. I also, Jake, I I will say I want to bring the caveats back slightly. I think that I would trust you to buy games for me. I would trust myself to buy games for you. And there's like a handful of people who I would also trust buying games for me
Yeah,
or for them. But it's so rare. And I think when that comes into play, it's sort of like why does this person not own the game already? Is it because they don't think they'll have the chance to play it with a group and you can provide a group? Great. That's really awesome for them. If Jake was going to give me, say, I don't know, a Vital Lacerda game and had planned an afternoon where Jake knew that my co-friend was going to be there. We're going to play a 3-player game of Weather Machine. Awesome gift. I'm so excited. Right? But that's
yeah.
a really rare scenario.
I don't think I would think of a Vital Lacerda game for you, but yeah.
What? I want to play it with you.
Okay, fine. No, I agree, but I think again that's kind of back to this idea of giving a game to a gamer, which just and
Yeah,
the one
it's so
caveat there
different.
is you need to have insider information on what they may want, and
Yeah.
I have
Yep.
that for you, and you have that for me, and
Yes.
and
You're right.
even in non gamers in my life will often ask for what I would like for my birthday or what I would like for Christmas or whatever, and it's great to be able to say like, well, here's like a few different, because people like to surprise you. They don't want to just like buy you one thing.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
sometimes I'll send somebody like, here are like 5 board games that I would love to
Interesting.
receive any one of
Yeah.
for this gift. And I think it's great actually that this hobby has that, because it makes giving games, it makes gift giving, I think, to me really easy. I always have an answer when somebody's like, what do you want for Christmas? It's like easy for me to think of 2 or 3 games that I might be interested in. They're relatively cheap. It's easy to fit a game under any, you know, this is our price limit for our family gift exchange. It's like $40, right? It's easy that
Yep.
I could pick a game that fits easily under that. So I'm not asking somebody to, go above and beyond. And I think that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And just asking somebody like, are there any like games you're interested in? Like shoot me a list of 2 or 3. I think any gamer in your life would love that
Yeah.
opportunity.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think so too. Do you have any closing thoughts on games as gifts, Jake? Besides, don't do it except for gamers. And if you do, know that it will hit the table in a week.
For non-gamers, again, you need to have insider information, not about like what games they want, but about what are the situations around this gift exchange. The reason I'm choosing to give a game to my mom for Christmas is I'm giving her the game called Poetry for Neanderthals. It's a party game
Cute.
where you can only speak, you have to get your teammates to guess a word on a card, and you can only speak in one word clues. So I played this at a friend's house recently and had an absolute blast with it. I was trying to get them to guess the word neck, and I could not for the life of me think of how to describe neck in one word clues. So I kept just saying like head stock. And I
That's
was like,
good. That's
yeah, I
good.
thought it was like head stock, head stock. And they're just like looking at me, just everyone's like laughing hysterically because it's like such an absurd thing. And but I kept wanting to be like shoulder. No, I was like in throat or out throat. Like it's just like everybody's laughing, having a great time. It's super light. It's a fun communal experience. It's flexible. That's probably important. It could work with just 4 people, but it could also accommodate more people than that. It also, I was gonna say, when you listed through your considerations, that theme might be the
Hmm.
most important one. That's something Bridget always is saying to me about games. Like, you need to tell them on the podcast that, you know, if people aren't super into gaming, like you need to be thinking about the theme first. Like, get a theme that will appeal to them. That's the way to get people into game. So my mom is a writer. She loves
Yeah.
writing. She writes
Nice.
poetry. So I think just immediately like that this is like a game that is sort of tangentially a poetry game is something that is absolutely going to be a slam dunk with her. So being able to bring in something else about that person and finding a game that fits with that, I think can be really key too. But again, the most important thing about this is the environment of the gift giving. I'll be giving it to her over the Christmas holiday. I'll be staying in my parents' house for a week. There'll be ample opportunities to play games together, so I know that I'll be able to do the teach. I'm very confident people have fun, and it's not putting a burden on anyone because we'll be, in that situation hanging out anyway.
That's awesome. I love that. See, and you have just in mind how you're going to get it played. You know that it hits thematically. You know your mom already enjoys playing games with you, so it will be a welcome addition to that expected maybe to come experience. So great. This was really fraught. I didn't think this was going to be such a fraught topic. We just came in and we were like, don't do it. It's
And maybe
pretty
that's
fun.
why if this is our bias, this is why we're so reluctant to say, even on a game that we both loved, we're,
That you
very
should buy
reluctant to
it.
say like, go buy this game because it's just tough.
I want to. Okay, I'm gonna do the ill advised, and I'm gonna list out 6 games I think make good gifts, and then we can cap this section, and
So
we'll
you're
move on to our
saying
draft collections.
go buy these games.
100%. Not
Okay.
quite doing that.
Okay.
But I'm just gonna really go quickly through them, and Jake, you can say if you think it's a bad idea.
Okay.
And this mostly is from my own experience, so mileage
Yeah.
may vary. For someone who loves Rummy Cub, which I know is a specific type of gamer, Azul, great game. For someone who loves trick-taking games and grew up playing spades or something, just get them Fox in the Forest and play it together. For a whole family, if you have 2, 3, or 4 people and you want to spend 45 minutes having a nice experience over a board, which is important to some people when they think about board games, Blue Lagoon, lovely experience. Not too heavy. For a friend group, if you just want to have a really lovely holiday season, I'm smiling, but there's great memories to be had. Just the Resistance. Can you go wrong? Jake, I'm unintentionally souping up my future collection. Okay. For a spell of morning holiday fun.
Wait, this is a sham.
This is all going to make more sense soon. But for a spell of morning holiday fun, I think Railroad Inc. is actually great. You can just bring that. You can give it to the group as a gift. Anyone who wants to opt in can grab a pad. It plays up to 6. It's done in 20 minutes. It's cute and fun.
This is the first one I'm kind of being like, doing the like buzzer. I think it's a little too complex
You
for
think so?
most people. Like there is like a considerable teach there, a lot of symbology to parse when you first roll those dice. I think I would opt lighter in this space. And I think like if for like a if it's kind of like the fun like roll and write game where we're kicking around, maybe a game like Silver and Gold by Reiner Knizia is a little lighter, a little simpler.
Phil Walker Harding.
Yeah, I would say Qwixx maybe is another good one, for example.
Oh, I see what's happening here. Okay, well, go lighter, go slightly heavier if you think 2 out of 3 of your cousins could handle Railroad Ink. I don't know. And then the final one, evening party gift. Maybe this one's too obvious, but code names.
Yeah, I
Code names
wouldn't.
is
I would.
like perfect.
Codenames is
No?
fantastic, but it's not my word game of choice.
What would just one?
I think just one is probably the safest bet because I think Codenames is fantastic and a little bit of a richer experience, but is a little less accessible. Just has more of a burdensome setup where just one you can literally opt in or out and teach within seconds, which I think makes it just a little bit safer of a gift for most groups.
And then finally, what you could do instead of giving gifts at all is just play Celebrity with your family because it's the best game experience there is. And then for this type
Yeah.
of setting, and then not worry about bringing out some object that might turn some people off.
Yeah, I think Jenga, there are fun classic games that people
Yeah.
already know and will already like. And I think that's great too. And, if your family already likes Settlers of Catan and you've sort of moved on, but they haven't, or Scrabble, like those are sort of the perfect games to play with your family over the holidays.
Make a memory.
Yeah, make
Yeah.
a memory.
Yeah. It doesn't just have to be for the game. Okay. That was awesome. But Jake, we have a job to do because we have built collections. We've drafted collections
That's right.
for $100. Do you want to talk the audience through the fairly loose rules that we used clearly? And then we've already done this. We're not drafting in real time. Jake and I async because of the async gamers in our little hearts. Asynchronously drafted back and forth with each other. So we'll talk you through our draft and our picks and then talk through how we feel about our collections. But Jake, what were our rules that we used?
So our rules was that we had a $100 budget. So in order to have a game added to our collection, we had to subtract from $100 the cost of the game. And we wanted to use games that were in stock that people theoretically, if we were doing this in real time, right?
Yeah.
We would be able to go and buy. And I think what we were thinking about, or I was thinking about, correct me if you had a different sort of idea about what you were trying to accomplish with your collection, was that if I had to get rid of all of my games and I was building up a brand new collection, or if I was somebody who didn't already have any games and I was building up a collection from nothing, either way, this is how I would spend $100. And I was also thinking that this isn't necessarily like the first $100 with a plan to eventually build out to a full 100 game collection again. It's like this is the games that you would have access to sort of for the long haul.
Yep. I completely agree with that. I thought of this as sort of like, this is my collection. This is $100. These are the games I own. I have to make the most of it. Which interestingly, I feel like pushed me towards, I wanted more games so I could have more options. It pushed me towards maybe some lighter games. And I want to also say, when Jake says we had to find it available in stock, we were looking online and if we could find a price, that was the price that we used for the most part. Most of these prices are taken from a website called Game Nerds. Some of them maybe dip into some holiday deals on sites like Amazon.
Yeah, it was interesting because we're doing this like literally on and around Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So we found some good deals for sure. And also, I and these are not like, oh, this is available for $8 here, but the shipping from
we ignored
is $20. No, I was gonna say, like, I think a lot of these are just like from big retailers with like very like normal shipping costs, or even Amazon, which would be available for Prime.
Yeah, but we didn't take shipping into account.
We did not take shipping or tax into account.
Yeah, no taxes. Yeah,
but I was just saying, like, this wasn't like off the wall third party websites where maybe they have, like if you go on Amazon, you like click other sellers, so it would be like one that's like half price and then shipping is like $40. It's like none of that going on here.
Yeah, there's no. If there's any shenanigans, they were mostly fair shenanigans based on you could go to a website and buy it for that price.
Brendan cheated a little bit, but
No, I didn't. No. Okay, I made a
I'm
list
just
of games.
kidding. I'm
I
just
made
kidding.
a whole list of games. I showed Jake my whole hand, and Jake was like, "Yeah, any games you could think of are work." So I played my hand to Jake, and then I had to, then I had to go outside the
Brendan's
list
like,
that
you
I
could
shared
add
between
some
the two of
games
us.
here. I'm like, I'm not gonna do
Jake
that.
was like, "I'm not showing you my hand." So let the record state also, Jake had me show him all my cards, and
But
then
you
we started
drafted
drafting,
first.
which was an advantage apparently.
Yeah, drafting first is a huge advantage because we did not do a snake draft. To
This
make
is
it more
true.
fair, I would have got to pick twice, but I was willing to cede that enormous advantage to you out of the kindness of my heart. It is
Okay,
the gift giving season.
and my first game, oh, well, you talked a little bit about what you wanted to do with your collection. Mine was pretty much the same. I basically, though, wanted a game for every occasion. So, in trying to have a game for every occasion that I might want to play games, I knew that the number one game I needed in my collection that Jake might snatch. We took that into account too. There were a few times where we were going through this list where I was like, ooh, if I don't take this now, I think Jake might take it. So,
Yeah.
if that ever happens,
That's the other thing, important caveat. So, right, we
yeah,
wanted to have a list of more games. So that's why we didn't swap. But perhaps there are some of these games that might have made both of our lists if
right.
we had allowed it.
But when one of us drafted it, the other person, they couldn't have it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. My
Okay.
number one game was The Resistance, which came in at 1847. And I think this is potentially the best $18.47 I'll ever spend in my entire life. Because I think The Resistance is the type of game that it just sits so squarely and wonderfully in almost every collection. It plays up to 10 people. And I think it's really hard to build a collection with having at least one game that could play up to 10 people without something like this. So it covers parties, and all social deduction games get measured against the resistance anyway. I feel like for the rest of time, Jake, whenever someone talks about a social deduction game, almost always the resistance is going to come up as a comparison. It's like Tetris and polyominoes. Like the resistance is social deduction in my mind. Someone out there is yelling into their earphones, "What about werewolf, Brendan? What about werewolf?" And I say, what about the resistance?
It's a great pick. I think some of my formative, hobby board gaming experiences and when I think back on those nights like fondly, just some of
Yeah.
the most fun game playing I've ever done. And it was just the resistance for round after round after
Yeah.
round with like 8 or 9 people around a table. And yeah, it's a great pick. And I looking over my list, I don't have a social deduction game, and it does feel like that's tough. But I also think about my real life of owning the resistance, and I probably haven't played it in 5 years because my wife doesn't like games
Mm.
where people are yelling at each other. And so it'd be hard for me to like justify one of my games to be a game that I know my wife actively doesn't like.
Yeah, that would be a no-go, I guess. So I
Yeah.
wasn't at risk of losing the resistance if I didn't pick it first.
I don't know. I'm
Oof.
pretty selfish. All right. But yeah, it's a great pick. I can't fault you at all. All right, should I do my first pick?
Heck yeah, which also made me very mad.
Yeah, so my first pick, and this was definitely the one I was hoping Brendan wasn't going to take when I offered him the first one. And I was scared because on the list he had sent us, it had the value of this game highlighted in blue. So I was like, does that mean he's like considering this first? Like, I don't know. But anyway, I picked The Isle of Cats. It's a 35.97. So this is a big, expensive game for the content of this
A
list, but
third of your
a
collection.
third of my collection right there. But I do think it's worth it for one specific reason, which is that like this game gives you at least 2 games worth of value in it because it has the competitive strategy game mode and it has the family game mode, and both of them are awesome. I recently was in Jackson, Mississippi with my in-laws, and this was one of the games I brought, and I played it with Bridget and my mother-in-law Cheryl, and it just worked so great, that family mode setting
Mm.
too, just as this like super intuitive, board gives you the experience of like an over the table board game, family game night experience that really anyone can play. And it's fun, genuinely very fun to play it that way, but it also has this true medium weight experience when you play with the income and the different side of the aisle, different cost of cats. You're sort of building up little engines of baskets. You've got just a huge deck of cards that to me offers a lot of replayability, which is also super important to me. So I think just for that factor, it felt worth this price. I think it felt like more game than I could perhaps get by pairing a different strategy game and a different lighter family game. And I think I would enjoy having this more. And I think to your point about like sort of the niche that I'm trying to fill with this, it's really that like this game covers both family game night with new gamers, people who are brand new to the hobby, and also can fit in on like I'm having friends over to play board games, and we're gonna get into some serious board game action.
I think for $100 collection, Jake, the question of how am I going to have a medium to heavy strategy game that feels like I'm inviting my friends over for a board game night, unless you want your collection to be 2 games plus maybe a light card game, it's pretty tough to find a solid pick that doesn't burn half your budget. And I think that this is a slam dunk on that metric. So yeah, so Jake, the Isle of Cats. I think we're going to have to clip because we're so excited about owning all of these games in our micro collections. And I think that to get through all these, we're going to have to go a little quicker. But
Okay.
my next pick, luckily, I already talked about it briefly on the show, was I wanted to go to a game. I didn't think Jake would take this one, but because of the constraint of $100, there's budget considerations. So it jumped up in the draft order for me because the risk of him taking it really would throw off my whole strategy of putting together a collection. This is The Fox in the Forest for $11.17. Longtime listeners will know that this is a game that I love. It's a game that Maya and I have been. It's a 2-player trick-taking game that just offers this compact, wonderful, variable experience that you could, in my mind, play forever. This is a game I think I'll own for the rest of time. Sometimes Maya and I go dormant on it, then we pick it back up and we enjoy playing it again. Jake and Bridget had a sort of different experience where Bridget got burnt out on it, and I think so that's why I wasn't worried about Jake picking it. But I think this game's great because you need, in my mind, for who I am and the way I like to play games, I needed a strong 2-player game. And The Fox in the Forest was just like, I needed it as part of my collection.
That's awesome. I would never have picked that game in a million years, but that's neither here nor there. I went with my second pick, also a game that I filled that niche of a 2-player game, but could also play more. But one thing I really love and need to have is like that 2-player dueling card game feel. And I
Yeah.
think this does accomplish that niche in a way that obviously I wouldn't be allowed to have Keyforge or like Magic the Gathering. Those wouldn't really fit into this type of collection. But I love card play, right? And I want
Yeah.
like big deck of cards with crazy effects, that sort of card input randomness. And the game I picked to accomplish all of that was Race for the Galaxy for 24.47. So I was at this point after 2 picks, I was looking a little bit wearily at my budget because I was at like $60 spent, and Brendan's at like 30, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if this is gonna work out for me. But I feel like the replayability and value in the 2 games I have so far is like pretty hard to match.
While we were making these lists, right, we were drafting async. So I had sent Jake my pick and I was waiting for his pick. And before he sent his pick, I was sort of like, the next game I'm choosing is Race for the Galaxy. And then he picked that. I was like, no, because this has to be so. Race for the Galaxy for 24.47 is just so much value. There's so
Mhm.
much game in that box. Now, Jake, you have 2 games that almost feel like big game night games. Like you could just have people over and say we're playing Race for the Galaxy and
That's
really
what I
enjoy
was
that.
thinking too.
Yeah,
It just feels like the type of game that you're, maybe eventually you've played it out, but I
I
haven't.
don't
I'm
think
not
so.
personally one of those people, but I know there are people who played this like hundreds and thousands of time and still find value in that base game.
Yep. The interactive decisions, oh, it's so good.
It's a great
Yeah,
game.
it packs a lot of punch. You like it more than me, and I was still gonna try to snag it just because of how useful it is for building a cheap collection. My next game, though, it kind of falls into this realm as well. This is a Bruno Cathala game, and I really enjoy Bruno Cathala's games. I knew I wanted something from him in this collection, especially because a lot of his games sort of fit into this lighter footprint but pack a punch in terms of the decisions they offer. So they're chewy often, and this game I thought was a steal. It's $15.47 for Spiel des Jahres winner, Kingdomino. Boom. This also, in my mind, does the thing that Isle of Cats does, though it's on the lighter end, in that you can play the 2 to 4 player version of this game. It's really light. You're just kind of breezily building this 5x5 grid with 4 people. You could play it with your family. It's fun. I like the game that way. But the way I really like the game is the 2 player Mighty Duel version that just comes in the regular box, but you use all the tiles. Super crunchy, chewy game for $15.47. Jake, I think this one was pretty good.
That's a great pick. I mean, that's got to be one of the, we're talking about value here for the first time on the show.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, that's just an insane value for a really, really great game that works as a gateway game, an intro to the hobby, but also a game that, experienced board gamers can find a ton of fun and excitement and skill building, especially in that Mighty Duel variant. I think it's a great game and certainly a great pick that fits well into any $100 board game collection. All right, my next pick. I knew I was going to pick a word game because I find word games just incredibly accessible. They often are the ones that I like to open up a game night, or if people are over drinking or something, it's having a few drinks. It's like a little bit more. It feels like less of like, hey, we're gonna go play board games now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
almost like slip it in by someone. It's like, oh, well, it's just like a quick little thing we can do. So Codenames was on my list. Just One was on my list too, but I went with So Clover. This is my favorite one to pull out at the moment. I've talked about it a lot on this podcast. I think it works really well at player counts up to 6. It gives me a little bit more of like a gamery feel than Just One. I get to feel a little bit more clever when I'm playing it, and I think it leads to a little bit more funny moments too. Sometimes I don't think it's as consistent as like hitting with everybody. Sometimes the game gets really quiet, and I've found that just in the sheer number of people that I've showed it to, that sometimes people just find it too stressful and challenging to come up with the good words. So it's not necessarily going to work for everyone, but I think it's a good one for me. And the reason I went for this, or I would have also taken Just One over Codenames, is just because I think they offer a very similar experience in that we're doing like clever word association, but I think they're just easier to get to the table, less of a teach.
And at $16.99, this was actually the cheapest of
It
those
was a
three
little bit of a
options.
discount, yeah.
Yeah. And it's newer, it's fresher. A lot of people have played Codenames. I think
Yeah.
this was a really good pick. I was not going to pick it though. This next game on my list, I guess Jake, let's do a mid draft review of our games so far, just so people
Okay.
know. So Jake has the Isle of Cats, Race for the Galaxy, and So Clover. And right now I have the Resistance, the Fox in the Forest, and Kingdomino. To that list, I was looking for that game that I was going to have a larger, kind of heavy, I'm using loosely here because I put Babylonia on the list of games I might pick, but it was $40. I love Cosmic Encounter. That'd be a game I would love to have in any collection, but it was $55. That was too expensive. Can't afford that. Then I was sort of like, okay, what about Castles of Burgundy? Oh, it turns out the Castles of Burgundy Anniversary Edition, the one that you can most readily get right now, $42. I'm not trying to break the bank to have my strategy game. So I needed to find a trap card. And what I found was Carpe Diem by Stefan Feld for $24.99, which that's a lot of. So Carpe Diem is this really cool tile laying card objective selection drafting game that initially we covered on the show. It was the second game we ever covered on the show. At the time, Jake liked it way more than me. I think he does still like it way more than me, but I've really come around on Carpe Diem. I think it's a great game. I think about it a lot. And it'd be one that I would love to have and invite people over to play sort of a capital B board game.
Yeah. Is this the for 24.99? Is this the ugly version of the game, or like the slightly less ugly version?
This is the slightly less ugly
The white
version,
box one?
the white box
Oh,
one.
that's a good look. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one that you want. Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great game. It's a great price. I don't think for that value, I think you did as well as you possibly could have for finding
Yeah.
that sort of medium weight. Like it's light enough that I think, if you're comparing it to, I don't know, it's weird, right? I think it has like a lighter weight rating on Board Game Geek than something like Castles of Burgundy, but it feels like it fits right in there, like sort of the mental strain that what you have to think through on your turn. It's very bandwidth testing. There's a ton of thought that goes into it. It's a fantastic game, and I think
Yeah.
it absolutely fits for that, for what you're trying to accomplish with it. That's a home run.
Yay.
All right.
Okay.
So I had, about $20 left at this point.
Can I interject, Jake?
Sure.
I thought Jake was screwed at this point because Jake had drafted 3 games and spent all of his money. But you did some good stuff here.
Yeah. So I had to get my like little weasel on, and this is probably the pick that I spent the most time thinking about. What I wanted to find was sort of like I wanted to, with my collection, I want to be able to like host a game night, right? And I find often that you kind of want the filler game. I think a filler game offers a lot of value to a collection. It can be a game that you play while you're waiting for somebody to show up, but it could also be something that you stick in your pocket and play maybe when you're, waiting for a table at a restaurant or whatever, right? Just opportunities come up. You're out traveling. You want to stick a game in your pocket to play a quick game and enjoy the view and make a memory. And so that was the slot I was trying to occupy. And I went through a lot of possibilities. Probably the runner up was Silver and Gold,
Mm,
that Phil Walker Harding game that I really like as a filler game. I mentioned before. But the one I went with was Qwixx, just sort of like the most dead simple roll and write game there is. And the reason I went with this is because I think you can play it with anyone. I've had tons of fun game nights where I'm just like hanging out with friends and we're just like playing game after game of this. It's also a type of game that you can play while talking and, having a good conversation, which I think is something, sort of like a low key great thing to have in the collection. It's like a game that you can be playing as sort of an activity, but it doesn't require all of your thought. And the other thing I was thinking about is one thing I really love in games is, and this is something I've been thinking a little bit about in the Discord too, is games that sort of offer variable experience in terms of like how. So game has a lot of randomness, right? It's very
hmm
random with the dice, and it has this variable in like sort of like how the game is just happening to go for you. And that
Yeah.
doesn't affect your ability to navigate it, but does impact your score. So I really like games that I could have a really low score or a score way below my average, but I still felt like I made the right decisions and played well. Or like sort of like the low lows, high ceilings, like what I was talking about with Bruges too. And I think Qwixx for a light game really fits that in. Like sometimes you just have a game of Qwixx where you get exactly the die values that you need to fill up your rows perfectly and quickly, and it's beautiful and it's fantastic. Or you don't, and you just get terrible rolls and it's impossible to win, but it doesn't really change the fact that you still get to make fun decisions for what they are. So I wanted that sort of experience too in games. And I felt like after a lot of thought, I knew you weren't going to pick this one, but after a lot of thought, I felt like this was sort of the filler game that also offered this other gaming experience that I really like that I didn't yet have in my collection to the extent that I wanted it. So Qwixx it was.
Tough to go wrong with a game that some people credit as the game that kicked off the roll and write craze. Coming out before a bunch of them for $9. It's just such a $9.97. Such a good deal. I really like this one. I was considering, picking Welcome to or Cartographers or Trails of Tucana, and the 3 roll and write games I really love, all in my large reel collection. But for me, it felt tough to find the right value consideration in terms of cost to impact on my collection ratio. And I feel like I couldn't nail it with those 3. And you found it with Qwixx for like, you can sneak a roll and write game in for $10 and it really does enhance your collection. So this pick, you're right, never going to pick it. But I remember reading my phone, seeing the message from you and being like, you dog. Because I had no idea you'd be able to do what you did. And I was like, oh, that was so good. So what I'm saying is, Jake, I was jealous and I wanted a game that would be, that could like fit a similar niche in my collection by being a really cheap counter pick. And I felt I wanted another card game. I really love card games. They're so important to how I play games. All three of the games that I've had published so far are card games. I needed more card games, but I needed something cheap. So in the real world, when we want something cheap, we don't go to sushi. But in the board game world, Phil Walker Harding had me covered. I hit up Sushi Go for $6.29. When Jake said that I maybe pulled one out, this seems like it was a holiday deal, $6.29. But I routinely see Sushi Go for pretty cheap. So,
Yeah.
listener, you can decide. I think it was fair-ish.
As we're
For this
recording
thing.
this, it's on Target and Amazon for that price. So I
Heck
can't
yeah.
really fault. I can't fault you at all. I mean, it's a great game, and at that price, like that, what a steal!
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
an incredible steal! Yeah, I was pretty upset when I saw that because I'm competitive. I want to win this. It's not even really a game, but
Yeah, we
I
haven't even
wanted to
set up how
win.
you could win, and Jake and I are both really wanting to
Yeah.
win.
And like it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, I put myself in a hole early. Maybe I made too ambitious picks with the price without really thinking. But I was like, oh, you know what? I found good value in Qwixx. So I'm like, I'm coming back. I'm catching up with him. He's gonna have to spend up. And he's like, nope, I'm just going $4 less than your $10 game for Sushi Go. And I was just like, damn. I wish I had seen that. Anyway, that brings me to my fifth pick and I have, something like thirteen
$12 and
dollars left,
yeah,
$12 left.
$13.
So
Yeah.
I picked a deck of playing cards for 19 cents. But no, I'm just kidding. I didn't do that. That would be a cheat for sure. I did look at Target, like it was like Black Friday deals, and I was looking at it, and they had like knockoff Jenga called like jumbling blocks for like $3, and I thought about putting that in, but that also seemed like a little cheaty.
It does feel cheating.
But I mean, jumbling blocks for $3, who could
Heck
say no to
yeah.
that?
Who doesn't love
So
jumbling blocks?
so I didn't cheat with a deck of playing cards or jumbling blocks. Instead, I wanted to, with this pick, I guess just I was trying to find, like, with $10 roughly left, like what is the $10 game I could find that has like the most depth, the most like replayability. And I went with The Crew Deep Sea. The Crew is a game that is just really impressive. I think that's sort of like one of the takeaways anybody has when they play it is like, wow, what a lot of game in a little box. Trick taking is not really my favorite, so maybe this one, is something that I can sort of like grow to like and learn alongside other people as well. I do think the Crew Deep Sea offers more value to a collection than the original Crew, just because it has the quick startup. You don't have to necessarily follow the logbook. You can just pick three, you pick your difficulty, and that tells you essentially like what challenge cards to draw and how many. And I think that gives it more of that sort of like infinite replayability than
Yeah.
the Crew, where you're just doing like the difficult missions over and over. Um, so yeah, I think at $10.17, the Crew Deep Sea seemed like a slam dunk just in terms of the amount of game in the box. And at that point,
Definitely.
I was just looking for as much game in a box as I could find.
Yeah. I thought that this pick was really, really strong for you, Jake. It gives you a game that sort of like when you get tired of playing Qwixx, you could just go back to this and play this. You could spend whole nights just playing the Crew, and I think it would be a really solid game in your collection forever. So when you took this, I wasn't considering taking it just because I'd already taken the Fox in the Forest.
Yeah,
But I
I
sort of was
knew
like,
that's I kind of when I saw that, I was like, this is probably going to be my last pick. So I'm like,
yeah,
there's no way he's going to take two
trick taking games.
trick taking games. Yeah.
Don't put it past me. My wife is Maya. You never know. But yeah, I felt like with this, I was like, okay, Drake did it. This is a really solid collection of 5 games for under $100 that offers so many different experiences. So I applaud you. But I got a 6 game in, which is I needed a Reiner Knizia game. I didn't have one, and I was going to be devastated. And I also wanted something slightly heavier. Before I picked Sushi Go, I thought I've already spent myself out of Babylonia. Tigris and Euphrates was way too expensive. That was never going to happen. Plus, it's out of print. I don't know. I needed something. So I thought maybe I could do Blue Lagoon. It's like $24. Maybe that would fit. But the Sushi Go pick pushed me away from that, which brought me to another game that I feel is a solid, you could invite people over to say, let's play modern art. To have a board game night out of modern art. And that's the game that I went with. 2167. So it packs a lot of punch. I think that Modern Art is a timeless classic. It's a game that everyone should play. So it's one that I'd be excited to have in my $100 or less collection because I could introduce it to new people. I've done that a lot of times in my life and it's always gone really well. And it's one that I really enjoy playing. I think it has a fun magic circle. And I really want to play this game with Jake one day. Jake's like smirking and nodding. I'm nervous he's about to come at me.
No,
Okay.
I've only played it once. I think it does offer like a very dynamic and interesting decision space. I think it's also the type of game that just gets better the more experience people have with it.
Yeah.
So I think if you have a group of people that gets into this, it's the type of game that has like the sort of the meta that will keep shifting and evolving and probably only offer more fun and satisfying experiences as you play it, which is a great thing to have in a game in a small collection. I'm hoping the Crew or like Race for the Galaxy for me would sort of fit that same niche, but I think you don't have that as much in yours. And so I think, and I mean, it's your collection and this is one of your favorite games of all time. So how could I possibly fault that?
Totally. Okay, let's do the list overall. I'll read mine and then you should read yours. So I have The Resistance, The Fox in the Forest, Kingdomino, Carpe Diem, Sushi Go, and Modern Art, all for $98.06.
What a steal. And for me, I picked the Isle of Cats. It's like Board Game Geek 106 or something. Race for the Galaxy, Board Game Geek like 70. So Clover, Qwixx, and the Crew Deep Sea, Board Game Geek like 44. So basically I have like 3 top 100 games in this little 5-game collection for 97.57. And I would just have to say, Brendan, it's quality over quantity for me, but we can all see clearly what sort of you went for.
Oh my gosh. I wasn't even prepared for this. I didn't know we were drafting based on Board Game Geek ratings.
That's why I was smirking because I was like Googling all those and like, let's see. Oh, I think these are in the top 100.
I draft Gloomhaven for my one game, my entire collection. But I have to get it on sale.
A lot of people would probably like that. Oh yeah, too expensive. Dang it.
Yeah. So this exercise overall, Jake, did anything surprise you or sort of jump out at you? I know for me, I was really surprised by how tough it was to. I guess what surprised me was how many lighter games packed such a punch for relatively little cost, and how many heavy games were way more expensive than I guess I appreciated if you only have $100 to spend.
Yeah.
Like a $40 game or a $50 game or a $60 game becomes such an investment. And it's a good reminder that board games, we play a lot of our games online on Board Game Arena. We have subscriptions there, so it feels fairly cheap. But this is an expensive hobby, and this was a good reminder of that.
Definitely. And it does seem, I think that I had a similar takeaway of just like light games in your collection offer so much value. I think that also speaks to like who I am. And when I typically am playing games in person, it more often than not, it's light games. I love these heavier game experiences and I love midweight game experience. But at the end, where I'm at right now in my life, it's like I go to a game night every other week on Wednesday when I can make it. Maybe, another time in that I'm probably playing like on the table like 4 times a month. And for like a heavier, like a board gaming experience. And the rest of the time, if I'm getting a game to the table, it's like The Mind, or something quick, something light, just because those seem to be the gaming experience that fit better in with the other things that I'm doing and the people that I have around me, which is fantastic. So that probably is showing up in my collection too. But yeah, when you're on a limited budget, I think probably having quite a few lighter games it's got to be a must.
I think also too, that word collection loomed large over both Jake and I's mind. So there's probably another strategy to do this exercise where you just draft 3 games you really enjoy. And it's valid, right? Like you have 3 games that you really enjoy, and that's a great collection. But I think we both, to differing extents, wanted to have more options. So I did think maybe I should do something like I'll just take Babylonia because I know 9 game nights out of 10, if someone wants to play Babylonia, I'm down. It offers a really solid 2-player experience, really solid 4. But it felt like I wanted to go more broadly. It also surprised me with there are games that I really love that I never would have picked. I put Keyflower on the list just to kind of pull the key hater out of Jake a little bit. But at $52, unjustifiable with this exercise in my mind. Just too
Yeah.
expensive.
I think it also kind of gets back to the point of like why I'm so hesitant to like suggest that anyone should buy a game. Like I'm
Yeah.
happy to suggest like play a game, but just for like even if, just the cost and also just the space bigger games
Yeah.
take up. And when I look at my game collection, I have so many like big boxes, and when I say big box, I just mean like the normal board game size box games that come out like once a year maybe.
Yep.
Or less, if I'm being honest. And that's okay. Like, I love having them. It makes me happy to have the option to play these games. But, it just feels like if at this point, honestly, if I'm buying a new game, it's more because like I want to own it because I like it, and I
Yeah.
want to like have that object. And that just feels a little absurd to like recommend to anyone else. Whereas with the light games, it just I don't know why, but for whatever reason, like the if I show a friend the mine and it costs $10 and I see them buying the game, I'm just like, yes, that's like such a huge win. I'm so happy. Whereas I don't think I would feel the same way like if I played a Feast for Odin with some friends on my birthday and then afterwards like that was great. I'm like buying that right away. I might be like, oh, that's kind of weird because like good luck getting it to the table a lot and I have it already, so like why don't you just play it together over here?
Did you Google a Feast for Odin for this exercise?
I did not.
I did, because I'm a silly guy. We could not do it.
How much is it?
I could fit my entire collection in the box for a Feast for Odin. Also, I don't know if this price is real, but right now it's looking like you're going to pay $94.69. So,
I mean, I think that's about right. I bet that's probably
yeah.
pretty close to what I paid for it.
But hey, we could both get our collections in the box.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I love the game, but it's just silly to recommend something like that to an audience at large for all the reasons we listed in our like gift giving thing. I think like the bigger the game is and the more expensive the game is, the more difficult. I guess we're just saying something obvious, but like the more difficult it is to like recommend or even like think for a second that would have broad appeal. But that's what's amazing about our hobby, that we have these like incredibly niche products that can make people with incredibly niche tastes very happy. And, I'm happy for that.
Also, we're such an enigma, Jake. Two people made a podcast called Decision Space, but we actually, trend towards and love light games. Who knew?
Right.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Who knew? Who could have thought that? But yeah, I think great job bringing us full circle. I want to remind everyone that we would love for you to participate in our community rankings for our year in review episode coming up. Check out decisionspacepodcast.com/rankings for more on that, or our Discord, which you can find a link to in the show notes. We're covering BattleCON next week. And when you hear this, just do the rankings. Just like go do it real quick if you have time and you want to participate, because we might be moving pretty quick on those. And we'd love to have your thoughts included in that episode.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see all of your $100 game collections in the Discord. Excited to see what other people would pick. And of course, who you think won out of our little experiment.
In the announcements channel, we're going to do a vote on the announcement for this episode in our Discord, where you can click the emoji for Jake's collection or for mine. That's how we'll tally the winner.
Perfect.
We'll see who wins, and we'll list them there again. So thanks for listening to another episode of Decision Space. This one a little bit fun, a little bit looser, and hopefully just an enjoyable ride through and through. And we'll see you next week for BattleCON.
And thank you as always to Hembry for our intro and outro music. Goodbye.